Disney's expressed interest in acquiring Fox Industries has sparked a lot of headlines and a lot of interest by the media, as it both threatens to corner the market and spark a new monopoly on the film media industry, as well as stifling competition and decreasing diversity, as some fear it will all be Disneyfied and made very, very PC, very clean, and all PG-13. However, Disney's acquisition of Fox will not only allow greater narrative capability and greater flexibility in storytelling, but will allow Fox as an industry under Disney to remain competitive and put out better, more creative and innovative films. So, to begin, how the merger will allow greater flexibility. For a very long time, for example, characters across different stories have been exclusive. For example, the MCU or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Only recently, through the acquisition of Spider-Man from Sony, and now the acquisition of the Fantastic Four and the X-Men through the purchase of Fox, may we now see a complete and whole cinematic universe. And according to Slash Films, a writer from them said that due to the lack of the full cast of characters due to licensing, they actually had to adapt and misrepresent certain adaptations of the films themselves. So now we will see a truer story for that. As well, this will be the first time the entire Star Wars franchise is owned by a single company. So we may see a remaster, a reboot, or perhaps just new, more innovative stories in that universe. So these still AAA titles will be going different directions, and the writers will have greater flexibility because everything is now under one roof. And additionally, Fox is not going to be scrubbed down by Disney, which brings me to my second point. The merger will maintain competition. Fox itself, according to an MSNBC spokesperson that interviewed one of the executives in Fox, they felt like they had lost their competitive edge among their titan rivals like Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu, which is why they chose to sell out. So, because of this, them now having the strong arm of Disney behind them will allow them to maintain competition and now have the ability and the capacity to put out films on the same tier and retain their edge. Disney has done this in the past with several different companies, such as Miramax Pictures and Touchstone Productions, which have been used in a very similar vessel as Fox will likely be used, as a semi-independent studio that is given a fair degree of autonomy, but is simply given better funds, more backing, and is therefore expected to, of course, make profits for Disney, however, on a smaller scale, because they cannot have any more big budget films coming out because they will risk auto-cannibalizing at that point, as they have roughly nine films a year, which will eventually all intercede on each other during the box office. So Fox being driven more down the indie route or simply, maybe not indie, but more niche groups such as the film Logan, an R-rated, much darker film, a superhero movie by all means, but completely a stark contrast to the happy-go-lucky Avenger films. So because of this, the merger with Fox will allow greater stories and greater characters, as well as a deeper, darker potential for different stories across the universes, and new projects as well. Thank you for your time.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, well, you've got a counterclaim here, but I'm not exactly sure what argument you're responding to since you never mentioned the advocate's proposition. There's not really any discussion of the advocate's secondary issues either, and there's no analysis of the advocate's evidence or reasoning, just your arguments about what appear to be counterclaims to these. Sounds a little low. These particular issues. The idea that there's going to be increased flexibility because of the ability to integrate these stories together. You've got the example of the MCU, which you use as an illustration, and the fact that they were separate companies makes sense that there's a reason why they couldn't be mixed together in the past. I'm not exactly sure how the stories are going to be more coherent as a result. If there's a storyline in the comics, for instance, that they haven't been able to develop because the properties were owned by different studios, that would have been a good example to illustrate that particular point. As it is, it's mostly your assertion that there's going to be some beneficial storytelling that goes along with this. Your second point is that Fox isn't going to be scrubbed down, and I do know that that's a counterclaim to a general argument that was presented by the advocate, although, again, it's not being applied specifically. So I think it's a good counterclaim. I think that's one of the fears that people have. Your first piece of evidence isn't really from MSNBC, but an executive that's being interviewed on MSNBC, and we don't know who that executive is, why we should trust anything they say, and it doesn't really sound like you're giving a very definitive quote from them. It sounds like you're kind of paraphrasing what they're saying, and I think that that's a little bit problematic. It needs to be clear. There also needs to be a little bit more context, because now it sounds like it's not movie studios that are competing with each other per se, but streaming services that are competing with the movie studios. And maybe that's what the problem is, but that would need to be explained a little bit more. The comparison to Miramax and Touchstone is okay, except of course you don't really have any illustrations of films produced by Miramax since its acquisition by Disney that maintain that harder edge that people are worried about. And Touchstone was originally created by Disney to put out more adult fare, and I think you could easily find some examples about where that was the case. The idea that they don't want films cannibalizing each other is okay, but I'm not exactly sure how many films are going to be coming out from either studio, and whether or not that's a significant problem. It seemed to me like there were some other issues that were being discussed. Your example of Logan is a good illustration, but you're in essence saying that these things would continue, and I'm going, okay, and why do you believe that they would continue? That you believe that the studio would be willing to take a gamble on something that falls outside of their success stream? That's kind of what you're making an argument for, and I think you need some evidence to suggest Disney would be willing to do that. All right, thank you.
Thank you.